catch up.
No.
Such a nice drive.
I
Like, I
stayed
grew up in
I was
northern
committed. I
BC
stayed
and
4
we'd drive
years.
down Shiloh for at
And,
least once a year, so just
before
that whole highway.
it was
is
Before everything got
just
ruined.
that was such a big part of my
Well, I
childhood.
left there before it burned down, thankfully.
My daughter.
I moved out before it burned down. Thankful for being.
Wildfire.
I love that.
They have it every year. When I was there, they happened every summer.
I am calling this regular meeting of the Town of Gibsons Council to order on July 8th, 2025 at 3:30 p.m. And we're honored to be gathered on the traditional territory of the Skokomish Nation. We primarily have two items on the agenda today. So we need to approve that agenda. Moved by Councillor Kroll, seconded by Councillor Lumley. All those in favor? The agenda is adopted. And now we adopt minutes of the June 25th, 2025 special council meeting. Is there a motion to do that? Moved by Councillor DeAndrade, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? The motion carries. And on to the big report of 40 pages anyway, which is our 2024 annual report. It's at that time of year to approve the annual report, and as the staff report explains, there's a certain timing to this of being 14 days after the release. And I'll just go to our communications coordinator and see if there's any highlights of this. I mean, we know the highlights of the year, I hope, but any changes to this particular report in terms of what's being presented?
There was a couple spelling errors, an image caption error, but there was no feedback on the actual report.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from council? Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. Just huge kudos to communications for the report, because it's refreshing, it's well illustrated, and new photographs, which is really lovely to see. So really, all I can say is well done. Bravo, Zulu.
Anyone else? Councillor DeAndrade.
Well, I won't repeat your lines because we're mine as well.
That's on behalf of all the council. Well,
But one thing I really appreciate, it was like how the breakdown for all the departments and the specifics and the staff and the pictures of what they're doing. I think it really, what am I understanding? Maybe a small percentage of people really understand everything that the town of Gibson has to do on an everyday basis. And I love the fact that everything was showed, and obviously the pictures in comparison to other years were like awesome. And I think it was excellent job. And I realized as well there was even more information, but without overwhelming the reader. So excellent job.
Yeah, visually it just keeps getting better, and I think it looks great. So is there a motion, Councillor Kroll, to approve the 2024 annual report? Seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That motion carries. On to natural asset technician. Our Director of Infrastructure Services will be presenting on this report with the official community plan amendment for update to development permit area, the long-awaited update to development permit area number 9. I'll go to Director.
Thank you, Mayor. So speaking on behalf of the natural asset technician who's under the weather today, I think the staff report's fairly self-explanatory. At this point, we are just looking for support from council to include the draft language that's included in the staff report in the public engagement that has been developed for the OCP. So there's a deadline of, actually the consultant just reached out shortly before the meeting where they're hoping to get this information by tomorrow if they're gonna incorporate it into the communication package, so hence the timeliness of this report coming to committee or to council. I think the summary of the changes to the development permit language compared to what is currently in the OCP and Development Permit Area 9. The objectives, currently there are 4, 2 of which are redundant with other regulations, one by the water regulation for water conservation, and then the other is covered by the contaminated site registry through the province. So we're just streamlining to really focus the objectives on protecting the aquifer from the impacts of development and vice versa. Made some changes to the application process and including some exemptions for the work that would be permitted under the new bylaw that we've presented. And then there's an update to the DPA boundary to make it consistent with the proposed bylaw, which you've seen earlier this year. And then the language itself within the OCP is included in the staff report, so I'll look for any questions from council.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is excellent. I have just a clarification question on page 59. The top when number 2, a monitoring plan must be developed or approved by a qualified professional and contain the following information. And C is for bonding purposes. So I was just wondering what conditions will we require the bonding? Would be like sub-area specific, or I was just wondering, because I was happy to see that.
Thank you. Through the mayor, that would be on a, I think that the intention of that is for areas where they would be doing work within the, specifically the areas where the aquifers and artesian conditions, where we would be looking for some sort of a value of what the remediation cost would be, or what the cost would be for containing if there were ever to be a loss of pressure. And the intention there would be for us to have some security where the town needed to step in to provide the service of containing an issue. That's the intention of that language. I'd have to, I don't know off the top of my head if that's included in the existing development permit language as well, or if this is new. I believe it was an addition. And I think this DP has gone through a few iterations, as the mayor alluded to. It was in process when I started here a couple of years ago, and is kind of, we're finally getting it to the point now where we're ready to share it with you. So I'd have to honestly go back and look through the notes preceding my time to see where that came from, and if there's a little bit of more background context on exactly what that bonding was recommended for. But my understanding is it's if the town were to be able to do so, that we would receive bonding, and that there would be some security in the event that there was something that happened.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. My question was also on page 59, and I'm not sure if this is new language or not, but it's the using construction of building or structures not requiring a building permit and that do not involve ground disturbance. Are there degrees, like with the new knowledge that we have based on the reports that have come in, is ground disturbance, it seems fairly ambiguous. Is it defined further for any person that might be reading this and questioning if they know that they're building a small structure and they don't need to, but maybe it's a koi pond, yeah.
Again, through the mayor, it's very timely. We just got some feedback from one of the senior technical reviews on the bylaw language, and that was flagged by the geotechnical engineer as well, that we'd benefit from a bit more or just elaborate on the definition of ground disturbance to clarify what we are and are not considering. With this, the real key is that if it's shallow enough that it's not triggering the depths that we have identified in the sub areas, then it would be considered we wouldn't need to go through the DP process. So something like a koi pond, if it's going to be half a meter deep or a meter deep, it wouldn't trigger the requirements because it doesn't hit the depth threshold. But if it was even a small footprint shed for one reason or another, where they wanted to go 2 meters, or they like a cold storage, like a root cellar, even if it's not a structure, if they want to go 2.5 meters deep, so they have cold storage, well, that would actually trigger a requirement. So it's more about the depth than it is what the footprint or the above. The intention of this was to say, if you're doing like a facade upgrade on a house, this is irrelevant if you're not doing a foundation. But we can certainly revisit that language and clarify that. And as we are gathering, I'm sure a lot of these questions will come out through the public engagement as well. And that'll be really beneficial for us to hear that feedback so we can tweak this and just make sure that it's user friendly.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Councilor Lumley.
Yeah, I just had a question about, I know that there's like the digging. I mean, I always think that if it's 1.5 meters, it's like, you'd almost, in order for full protection, you might just say like no digging, but, because I generally don't trust somebody that might say, oh, I'm not gonna go past 1.5, but they do. The other thing is too, is that, and the question, I guess, would be, I know that is there not also, aren't they studying, like, so if somebody can't go down, then they're gonna go up, and there's a certain amount of weight that's gonna be placed on the aquifer for like the particular project. So I'm sure the engineers and geotechnical people are gonna calculate probably the weight per square foot, or I'm not one of those people, so I don't know, but is that, like, at some point when that's determined, will it be written into the DP as well, or is that close at all? Because I know they're moving forward with that development, but it's basically like the weight on the aquifer, and I know the DP9 doesn't include that. Now, I just was curious if that's going to get added when those figures are immediately known.
Yeah, the massing, something we've been talking about for a while.
Thank you. Yeah, and through the mayor, the issue is very much site specific. It really depends on what the specific ground conditions are of a site, where one property may have a lot of peat and a lot of material that's not necessarily really competent for supporting a heavy structure. A property that's 500 meters away might have a lot more sand and gravel and be totally suitable for a completely different structure. So the intention through kind of this regulatory package is going through the iterative process to determine the site-specific conditions so that a development can be tailored to suit the ground conditions of that property, rather than here's the development and let's figure out how to make it work on the property, where that there just may be no way of making a certain type of building work on a certain site. And so the intention with it is to identify those concerns through the investigation process, so that once it comes time to design the development, that they've resolved, they know what the bearing capacity is of the soil, they know what they could safely do to remediate that, to improve the bearing capacity, and then they can figure out, okay, well, based on what it'll support, we know that we could do 4 stories instead of 6. Like something like that. Conceptually, that's the iterative process, and it would be, we wouldn't be able to come up with a specific number to say that, the maximum mass of a building or load of a building would be X number of pounds per square inch. Like, we just don't have site specific enough information to be able to do that as a blanket, but we it is certainly part of the process that we would be looking at and review to make sure that the ground conditions that are identified through a geotechnical program are consistent with what the load of the building is when it gets to design. Does that answers your question? Okay.
Any, Councillor D'Andretti?
Thank you. I'm not finding exactly what I read that, but in some occasions, there will be a need for our own, I believe, water line or WSP. I think it says here, not, it doesn't say their names, but for another in-depth investigation. In this case, is it something that it will be required from the developer to pay our preferred investigator, or this will be the town that has to deal with the cost?
Yeah, through the mayor, that would be part of the developer's responsibilities. Through that process, we would come to agreement with them that, and really it would just depend on the complexity of the development but even more specific for this type of work, the complexity of the site. So for the most part, I would assume that most properties in town, the ground conditions would be such that it would be reasonable for us to keep that internal and just review what's been provided. But particularly in the spot where we've got artesian conditions and it's a little bit more vulnerable, there's just more inherent complexity in those types of developments that do at times require the technical expertise that we just don't have internal.
Thank you, Mayor White. If there aren't any more questions, I was going to move the motion.
Yeah, I thought that's what you were, but I think there's one more here.
Thank you. Actually, it's a more clarification. When I read, it's the last paragraph of the last page. It says, as aquifer 5.6 is flowing artesian, the GWPA. I think you were talking about GWPR because you're talking about the regulation, right?
Go ahead.
Through the mayor, I believe it may be the Groundwater Protection Act, but I'd have to, it may be the regulation, that could just be a typo as well. Yeah, so we can clarify that maybe before we put the language out to, for the public engagement.
Councillor Kroll is moving the recommendation. Go ahead.
So, yes, I'd like to move the recommendation that the draft aquifer protection development permit area language be included in the public engagement package for the official community plan update.
And Councillor D'Andretti has seconded that. Any discussion? All those in favor? The motion carries. Our next meeting is next Tuesday, July 15th at 3:30 p.m. And then we have another meeting after that, July 22nd. I think we're catching all the Tuesdays this month, or close to it anyway. Actually, we canceled the 29th, so, but we've got the next 3 weeks anyway. So these next meetings will probably be longer than this one. But we'll, as long as we adjourn right now. Nobody wants to, though. Moved by Councillor Lumley, seconded by Councillor Kroll. All those in favor? The motion carries.